I want to welcome everyone to the Education Committee and remind everyone to please turn off their cell phones or Blackberries off the table, please, because they will allow us to hear feedback and it becomes rather bothersome. Also, those committee members that are accessing their computers, you should know it so that they can access the materials from the board meeting versus watching the scores in the baseball game. I don't think baseball's playing yet today, is it? I don't know. So the agenda calls for public comment, and anyone that wants to have public comment, there are there are papers in the back. And Lisa, could you identify yourself so anyone that would like to speak on public comments, they should give them to you, please. I'm going to also ask everyone to remember that this is an official meeting of the Medical Board of California, and that I would expect that the decorum that is afforded the people in the meetings generally will be afforded here as well. And I will use the option of shutting down the comment section if it gets out of hand, but we'll go for 2 minutes for starts with public comment, unless we see that there's another need for that. And, I said, give it to Lisa, you want it? It's okay? I'm sorry. So we're going to call the meeting to order and ask for Lisa to please call the roll.
Dr. Diego? Dr. Levine? Present. Dr. Solomon? Here. Ms. Shipsky? Here. And Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Here. So we have a quorum present. Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment slips that I'm not aware of? We don't, so we'll continue with the meeting. I need an approval of the meeting from July 19th, 2012, Education and Wellness Committee. Are there any additions or subtractions or corrections or anything?
So moved.
Second, please. Second. And any public comment? No? So thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. So that happens. It's done. So we're going to move to item number 4 in your packet. An update on the outcomes of the Medical and Pharmacy Board's joint forum to promote appropriate prescribing and dispensing. And I'm going to ask Ms. Harold from the Pharmacy Board, as well as Ms. Whitney, our Executive Director. Welcome back, Ms. Whitney. It's good to see you walking around. To come forward and give us an update.
Good morning, and thank you for having us here this morning. The most important thing that came out of the forum is the working together of the Board of Pharmacy and the Medical Board of California, the joint cooperation to put together a forum of this nature took a lot of staff work, and we didn't have one argument in who was going to do what. We split the duties and share of everything, and it was just a tremendous effort and would not have happened if we didn't have such wonderful staff who are working on this, and the commitment from both boards to ensure that the day worked really well and that the information got out. In terms of the important aspects for the Education Committee, we learned a lot at the forum, and I want to thank a number of the board members who were able to be there. We actually had 5 board members from the medical board, and I think pharmacy had...
We had 5.
Yeah, so that was... Yeah, I think you had one extra. But in terms of the educational aspect of the forum, we found out that we do need to spend more time educating our licensees about cures, about what they need to know and what they need to tell their patients, both the prescribers and the dispensers. The communication needs to be improved, and we also need to spend some effort in educating our consumers, the patients out there, who need to understand what it means when you get a prescription, to ask the right questions, and what you do with the leftover drugs that you did not take. You know, what are the avenues of returning those drugs instead of just putting them in your cupboard and having the potential for someone else to use those. So there was a lot that came out of it. In your packet, and I'll let Ms. Harold speak in just a second. In your packet, there's a lot of information just from the forum in terms of who attended and some of the highlights. And on page EDU 4-2, you'll see some of the educational needs. But before we go into specific issues, I'd like to ask Ms. Harold to make some comments about her views of how the forum went and some of the items that came out of that.
Well, again, I want to appreciate the opportunity that we had with the medical board to do this, because it's really, at least these two boards have a very strong joint collaboration needed in this area for the benefit of the public as well as our licensees. And we are both being watched because as the primary prescribers and the primary dispensers, we have a huge role here in the area of prescription drug abuse that has just literally gone right through the roof. So I think we have ongoing efforts that we need to do in the area. Sometimes when you go to forums, you go to them, people walk out, they're kind of like lukewarm, they come and go. We actually had people that came in the room, they stayed in the room, and I think they were listening. Now, some of them may have both been, we certainly had one revoked pharmacist in the room. I don't know how many others were in the room, but he showed up with his attorney. And you may have had a couple of your problematic physicians in the room as well, because sometimes they want to see what the regulator is saying after the fact. But there were a lot of other people in the room that had never heard this information before, and I think that that is a huge benefit. So I'm delighted we did it. I just think that given the positive reviews that we might want to consider what we were talking about during and what we were asked to do during the forum itself is perhaps look at another 6 months out, maybe doing one in Southern California. And I think that the caliber of the speakers needs to remain at the same level, because unless we have the speakers and we keep moving at a very lofty level, it can become just another forum, and we lose our real strength, I think, in really getting thought-provoking concepts in front of our licensees, which is really where we're going, and rethink a little bit how you're prescribing or how you're dispensing. There is a lot of material that's out there right now for the public, for licensees. There's a lot of data that's out there now that maybe needs to be packaged better so that's more digestible, I suppose, for our licensees. And I think that's one place we may want to go. Before we came to this meeting, we produced photocopies of just a couple of the government sites and then one from Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma, the drug companies do wonderful glossy things, but they come with a little bit of a taint, let's call it. Purdue Pharma, which produces OxyContin, has produced a lot of public ed materials. They've got a very aggressive public outreach campaign to protect their marketing and their product. But we have a number of things, so I'll share those with the committee as we proceed. I think our difficulty in moving forward is I'm not sure the same brochure works for pharmacists that would for prescriber. I'm not sure whether or not we want to go into the area of appropriate pain management, which is a whole different thing. But we do have educational ideas about don't buy drugs from somebody you don't know. Don't flush your drugs down the toilet. Find an appropriate way to clean out your medicine cabinet. And those of you that have kids, just don't leave your drugs in the cabinets where they have access, because much as you love them, they're going to do things you don't like. So I think there's educational moments in some of that. But I would, from the board side, and we have our public ed meeting next week and then followed by a board meeting in about 3 weeks, I believe based on our attendees, and our president unfortunately had a huge conflict and could not even make this. We're very interested in continuing this. I will tell you that we've got some dates already set up with the Drug Enforcement Administration to do part of what they've been doing nationwide already. They're in August 16th and 17th in San Diego, and August 18th and 19th in San Jose. They're 1 day, but they're 2 days back to back. But they're intended as separate 1-day forums. It's just they're going to run 2 of them, and we're going to publicize these. And this is just essentially what Mr. Ranzanese spoke about. You could see his PowerPoint. He wanted 2 hours. He could have probably had 4. And then we get up and we talk a little bit about corresponding responsibility. So those are aimed at pharmacists. I think physicians may be interested, so I'll share the dates and make sure that Ms. Whitney knows it so that we can share those. Yes?
I can't help but think of other prescribers, and who I'm thinking of in part will be oral surgeons. I am surprised how many of my patients, when I get their drug history, how much vitamin we get
Oh, I
from
know.
a living tube extraction. And I'm also thinking PAs have, I know they're supposed to be under supervision, but they have a fair bit of autonomy, and DOs who are obviously prescribers, and we can only think of one high-profile case. So
I think we all went there.
include other
And I think for this initial forum, we weren't sure, first, how many people would sign up, the interest at both the pharmacist and physician level. We did, in fact, get a few nurses, PAs. We didn't get any dentists who came that registered. But we didn't expand our focus because, again, we weren't sure. I think for any additional, we certainly want to, but also when we look at our educational materials, we want to ensure that some of our educational materials be more broadly directed so we can share it with the nursing board and dental board, that they could actually post it on their website, put it in their newsletters, very generic kinds of information that wouldn't be maybe physician specific. Dispensers, a little bit different, although we do have some physician dispensers and dispensing going on in clinics, so physicians need to know about that. But I think what this committee here in helping us set priorities and giving us direction on in terms of developing materials would help us look at the generic side and when we should engage some of the other licensing boards, because I do agree with you that that's important.
Dr. Levine?
Two things. First of all, I've been to a lot of CME meetings, and this was by far one of the most informative. The quality of the speakers and the quality of the content was outstanding. And what I think one of the things that made it so successful was the tone. This was a forum devoted to the 99% of physicians and pharmacists who desperately want to do the right thing. There was no blame, you people are killing people attitude, either explicitly or implicitly. And what it did was create a tremendous openness among the participants to hear the message and to actually reflect how desperate they were for quality information. And Ginny, I think you're absolutely right that one of the challenges around the use of or restricting the use of opioids to where there's evidence that it makes benefit is that for patients with chronic pain, the number of options, effective options for treatment are actually quite limited. And so the instinct to default, if you will, to narcotics has been encouraged, has been promoted, and the physicians that I talk to on a daily basis say, I get it, I don't want to be doing this, I don't want to be creating dependence, I don't want to be creating addiction, certainly, but I'm stuck. Motrin goes only so far. And so the non-farm, and this is not the topic of this subject, but the issue of investing in education and research actually on non-pharmacologic treatment of pain, living with chronic pain, is an issue for the profession. As more of us are living much longer, we're living with chronic conditions that are often associated with pain, and the number of treatment or therapeutic options are actually quite limited other than drugs, pharmacologic agents. They certainly play an important role, but I think we've got the attention of the prescriber and dispenser community in California. And one of the things that people ask for at the end is, all my colleagues, all my partners should have had the chance to come here. So I think you'll find a very receptive audience, particularly if you can, as you said, keep the level of the speakers at this level.
Dr. Salmonson?
We can't redo the symposium here, but I was struck by the comment, maybe I just heard it, that I think some of the information that physicians got from the previously mandated 12 hours of pain was that it was safe to keep ratcheting up the opioids, and that we were bound by that pain scale, and we just had to get that report down to like a 4. And it was up there with temperature and pulse. We thought we could regulate it the way we can blood pressure, and that, I think we found out from this seminar, was based on a very limited number of patients. It wasn't the chronic pain out in the community kind of patient, and I think we had a false sense of how much opioid we could and should prescribe. So I think, yes, that was hugely important information, and that's huge. And I can't remember which speaker pointed that out, but that study that we've all kind of relied on is very limited.
I want to take a minute and also compliment you on the on what went transpired. But I think that we all have to remember that this was the first attempt at doing this, and now we have learned our lessons and best practices. The need to expand the audience and expand the access to the site, be it remotely, be it GoToMeeting, whatever the computer technology is that's available. But to listen at the Senate BNP Joint Committee meeting that even optometrists have the ability to prescribe was, I had no idea. But anyway, but it's not only, it's everybody that's prescribing needs to have this information, because then those boards will be able to disseminate and share that information. We have to have a coordinated message, and we have to take the time to do this right. What happened, it was great. But now we've learned, I think, that we have a whole huge, bigger responsibility. And if we were able to bring together 5 or 6 boards, in fact, and I'm not so sure insurance companies shouldn't be part of the conversation, because they're the ones that are currently mandating that 40 Vicodins are prescribed, and they are paid for $5 when you go to your oral surgeon, which is ludicrous. So in addition to the, I think that everyone needs to be there, and I would just recommend that we try and make sure that everyone is at the table, and we make sure that we have some kind of an organized campaign. Maybe staff gets together with all of the different bureaus and boards that have the ability to prescribe, and take a look at how best to roll this plan out and just make it happen, so that and we have some real major push, and we get some major push from the media. And all of the health editors from all of the newspapers up and down the state should receive links to what happened and in future things. So we need to do what we did. You guys really have to be complimented on what happened, but we've got to now, we can't let that come down from the 30,000-foot view. We have to continue to keep it at that high level, and I would look forward to helping you if I can be of any help, as I'm sure any of the members on this committee would be as well.
One of the things that I think that we've got the interest. I keep forgetting we're webcasting. I think we've got the interest of the other boards. That we had the optometric board there. We had people from the Board of Registered Nursing there. I don't know about the dental board. I don't remember that there was someone there. But one of the things that I think we need to pursue maybe in the future, if it's something that works on your end, one of the recommendations that the literature out there is encouraging pain contracts, where you go to one physician, you have one pharmacy. There's a joint area there where we can show examples of pain contracts. We had started pulling it because initially, I'm not even sure you are aware of some of this. When we started this process, we were going to do what's appropriate pain management. And we were talked out of that one really early, like our first coordination meeting was the people that know it aren't going to come. The ones that don't know it think they know what they're doing, and they're not coming either. So, So we kind of looked at, and at the same time, the prescription drug abuse was just skyrocketing, and cures funding became an issue. So we were in the right place at the right time with the right product, which timing's everything in life. But
well, the intractable pain has already been, I think, dealt with by the medical board exceptionally well, and I think that those doctors, as you say, are very well aware. We maybe need to get the message out that those doctors are doing their job, and their patients need to realize that they need to stay on top of that too. But we can always do better with patient advocacy and education. But I think that we've gone down that route. Let's make sure that we are bringing everybody to the table that needs to hear this message. The message is excellent, and people are clamoring. I mean, these parties that go on, and they're pharma parties, they exist, and we need to understand that, and kids die.
Here are some handouts I'm going to hand out. There is a bill, it may be a spot bill at this point, that uses the phrase intractable pain. They're going back in and putting intractable back in. So
Well, it's a good word to use.
yeah, they're putting it back in.
I don't know what the bill's going to say. We'll hear about that later, I'm sure. We might not like the bill.
So some of these items that are being passed out, what we want to ensure is in the education of our prescribers, dispensers, and the consumers, that we're not reinventing the wheel. There are many publications out there that are very good, very useful, and there's no reason that we can't use them or incorporate some of the information into our newsletter to help explain different information. What I did notice that we didn't ask when we did the evaluation, we were very good in asking, would you be able to use anything you learned in your practice? And would you? Are you going to change your practice based upon something you learned here? We didn't ask the follow-up question, and what is that you're going to do differently? So we learned that from what we had. But when 71% strongly agree that there's something that they learned that's going to change or impact their practice, that's a very important item, and we need to then do some more follow-up to find out, what it is and how we can promote that to other prescribers and dispensers. If you're going to do something different, how can we move that forward to other individuals who might make a difference in their practice? But we didn't ask that follow-up question.
Ms. Whitney, do you think that it might be advantageous to survey those people that have to deal with enforcement issues on all of these boards as to what are the priorities of, let's say, the top 5 issues that get people into trouble in their profession as far as it relates to prescribing? And see if that we could address it from an educational perspective through our newsletter, how best to, so again, not to when you said not to reinvent the wheel, that's all of a sudden that popped up in my head.
So in looking at page 4.2 and some of the other information that we've gotten from our evaluation and looking at the materials that have been passed out, for this committee, we're looking at what we can do to educate and where we want to go with the education before we start setting a date for another forum. We want to have some direction in education. And it's going to be a joint education because we want to ensure that the underlying issue of physicians working with pharmacists and feeling comfortable working with one another and discussing the issues of prescription that comes in, that we want to promote that interaction. And that was one of the major items that we wanted to get across to those who came to the forum, that the other licensee is not your enemy. The other licensee is your partner. And we want to help establish that partnership and that they are partners in the health care for that patient. And it's very, very important that they see each other as partners. And we've had incidents in the past where they haven't quite seen themselves as partners. So we'll be looking at how we can help promote that. But there are a number of other things. So first we'll start with the handouts that Ms. Harold provided you so we can go through those.
Well, I don't think we need to spend valuable committee time going through these unless you really are interested in doing so. You go up almost any website, all of these but one are government-run websites. And there is a lot more material. We just did quick hits, literally very quick hits. One of them, this one right here, deals with how various practitioners and pharmacists can work together, which was right down our alley, and we hadn't seen it until this morning, frankly. So there's so much out there. I think maybe part of what we can do is steal from the best and kind of do what we can there. But I think I don't want to take committee time unless you want to do that. And I saw a couple head shakes. So
I can't just a comment again on why cures. That was the other thing I learned. There's that one person working cures. I mean, where are we? Because that. What can we do to try to encourage that? Because we're all kind of relying on that now. I mean, I'm stunned that one person is trying to keep that afloat. I knew they were underserved, but that's...
Well, there's some political things, as you might imagine, when it's a very expensive program. But it's essential. It's actually cheap compared to what the lack of the knowledge is. And in fact, it's in our opinion, we've been there much like the medical board from the beginning, back in the mid-1990s. This program, and were you at the medical board in 1990? 1990s? 94, okay, well, that was just about the time the bill went through, where we started looking at cures as a means to differentiate between those that are abusing prescription drugs or controlled substances and those that need the controlled drugs. And the goal was to separate the two.
Right.
We are on the precipice of being able to reach that. And, but we need a new computer system to do it. And I think the amount of money that they're telling us, at least the last estimate I saw, was $1.6 million coming from the practitioner boards to fund it. Then they're looking at reestablishing the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement, which is a slightly different issue. That isn't cures. That's going out in the field with field agents, which is a valuable option. But I'm not sure we should be funding that as regulatory boards. But with that going on, we need a new computer system. And as I said, it's just like what happens when we get pulled over. Give us a system that you can run our license plate. In this case, you can run the prescription. You can see who that patient is in front of you. Our guys can see who that patient is when they come in to get it dispensed. And if it's even reasonably close to online real time, we'll have the information and the data we need. We just need a new computer system to do that. And I think part of the service would be more than that one person who's been temporarily assigned over in DOJ. There's also some education that needs to go on around that so that the people that call in are getting, this is what the law requires, and this is what you need to be doing, because there's a lot of lack of information, because as the program shifts from one unit to another, that information base that was once in the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement is no longer there, and it's not quite yet up with the cures unit.
And we will have a further discussion at our executive committee because the bill will be presented to you. So that's really where we want to discuss that issue.
So let me suggest to you that on an outcomes expectation of this committee having something to do beside sit and listen to these informational reports and resources, that could I ask staff, of both staffs possibly, to come back, let's say, with a top 10 or top 20 issues, and that we could take a look at coordinating through the newsletter, just a blast, a point, either a blast on the website, a blast on the computer thing, so on the newsletter. So if it was on responsible returning of drugs to where, and the number to call to get that information, or something, so that would physicians, they don't have a whole lot of time. I know that they enjoy reading the back page of the paper, from what I understand, but something that's not what I
People Magazine.
People Magazine apart. But what I'd like to see is some kind of a blast on the front section, maybe one or two tips to tell doctors and pharmacists this week, this month, this quarter, that this April is Take Back Your Drugs month, and all pharmacies within the city limits of X, Y, and Z counties are available. So direct your patients to something where patients can take responsibilities, doctors and pharmacists can take responsibilities, because patients have heard from their doctors or their pharmacists. Did you know that you can do this today? I'm refilling a prescription at my pharmacy. Did you know that next month you can bring us any of your unused prescriptions? Something that patients, so people can hear.
The difficulty is you cannot bring in any Schedule 1 or 2 drugs. You can't.
Well, I'm not suggesting what the rules are. I'm just saying, can you give us some information?
But that's one of the crux of the problems, is that it's the unused narcotics and other things that are not being disposed of. We've got a whole issue about unused birth control and other things getting into the water system, but because you have to have a law enforcement agency present when you in fact bring these other medications in, it really prohibits where they can be dropped off. Because we've tried it in Long Beach, we had to actually have the police department sitting there doing it when you brought it up, because there's a whole issue about chain of custody to make sure that the drugs are properly disposed of. We now have a hazardous waste place that, again, there's some limitations as to what can be brought over there. So I just say it's something we need to address. I think we talked about it 2 sessions ago. It's a practical thing, and maybe this board can work with pharmacy board.
If this is the number one issue, then let me ask staff then to bring back what I was only giving an example of something I didn't know what I was talking about to be put in the newsletter where everybody could understand and get a message from somewhere. But if this is the number one issue of how do you dispose of it, that's not real hard. We can bring in some people and get some answers and make a policy and make it happen. I don't think it's so hard. Let's put it that way.
So I'm going to make an analogy to gun control.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same.
Because the process of what they call the take-back programs is pretty much the same as bringing guns in for exchange for money. Not that people get paid for bringing their drugs, and I
Sometimes they do.
Oh,
Pathetically, sometimes they do.
okay.
Get a gift certificate from a.
Well, so but the point being that, like guns, there are 250 million guns in the possession of individual citizens at the moment in the U.S. So the take-back programs are a piece of it, but there's a prevention piece also, which is decreasing the flow of likely to be unused drugs into the supply, into the stream of available for use. There's the disposal piece, which is expensive, and I think now we've got twice-a-year take-back programs because of the requirement for peace officers to be there and for chain of custody, as Jerry said. And then there's the should you be prescribing this in the first place for someone who does not have pain related to cancer? And so I'm not sure that there's a number one, but there are several that compete for first place. And so a sequence, I think you're absolutely right, a sequence of articles and placement on the website is a great idea. And doing it in bite-sized pieces so that
exactly.
people can digest the information.
So it's like that zap message in the cartoon when you read the comics. Well, at least it used to be there when I read the comics. There was like a zap message above the guy's mind.
Yeah.
And it had, 5 words,
Maybe
7
that's the way
words,
Oop, cultural illusion.
whatever it's called, some kind of a blast and some kind of a thing. Or an article, but I'm just suggesting that if we should do a coordinated campaign, is what I'm looking for is if staffs could get together and figure out what are the top issues that we can address, use our technology that we have anyway, and bring it back. But
yeah.
I would venture to say, if it is the number one issue is the quantities that are being prescribed, insurance companies have got to be at the table because they may not mandate you have to have 40 Vicodin when you have your tooth pulled. The insurance, when you go to the pharmacy to fill that prescription, they give it to you and then you say, why are you getting so many? Because if it's not the insurance company, then let them come and tell me that it's not. Let them come into the room. Let them be part of this discussion.
Well, part of the problem is, I think, some of the way insurance plans work, they pay X amount for a prescription. And so, yes, it seems like the patients do want more because if they've already paid it, they need 10 or they need 20. They'd rather get 20 at one time because they'll pay a flat amount. But I don't know that's true for drugs.
I think we need to hear some facts, okay? I think all I'm suggesting is we need to hear some facts. So I would venture to say.
Fact.
I have a fact.
Oh, good, okay.
So the way, and I do this as my day job, the way drug benefits are written, the benefit is up to 30 or 90 days for a single copay. That's the way they're written. That does not compel the prescriber to write for a 90-day supply. It is up to the physician who holds that license to say, you only need 5 days of pain management. I'm not writing based on what you're allowed under your benefit. This is not an insurance company issue. This is an issue of the way prescribers think about, I think sometimes very well intentioned. Well, it won't cost you any more, so I'll give you as much as the insurance company will allow. But there is no insurer who mandates a 90-day supply.
Okay, I will trust your knowledge on that, but I would just suggest that somehow we have to stop the stem of unnecessary drugs going to the household, sitting around in a medicine cabinet, young people coming and taking the meds, dumping them into a punch bowl and drinking the Kool-Aid. So whatever, and then being able to return it. So I'm just saying I'm not here to address what the priorities are. You guys are here to address the priorities and bring that back. So that's what I'm asking. Okay?
And we jointly with the pharmacy board will work on those priorities and also incorporating reaching out to the other licensees that prescribe to do an effort to find out how we can broaden this public information and licensee information, but also how we can jointly work together, because they should be involved in our next forum. So that will be something that we can develop between now and the next meeting of this committee.
Madam Chair, though, I think there's another component we are not even talking about, which is what hit the paper, and that is when the medical board does have a case of physicians prescribing or overprescribing, or and we talked about the need to have the coroner report to the board, is the death related to, and I think those need to be, from the board's perspective, I think the top issues. We've got to figure out, do we need additional regulations? Do we need something in law that allows the board to perhaps impose a stricter penalty when, in fact, a physician has wrongly prescribed over a period of time, or if
Or stop practice of prescribing specific drugs until it's determined that it's appropriate.
Because I think the other things are very important and they need to be done, but I think the major role of this board really has to look at, are we in fact doing the best we can for consumer protection on this particular issue about overprescribing, maybe wrongly prescribing, and the fact that we've got consumers that are very concerned that physicians who have been found to do this, the license hasn't been taken away, and they continue to practice. So that at some point needs to be seriously addressed.
And that was actually an issue that came up during the Sunset Review hearing. What do you do to expedite the discipline for those prescribers that are obviously over prescribing, that you've done your investigation? How do you get them out of practice faster? But also, what are the other elements that you need to do to enhance the law to take care of this issue? And I think some of those we are dealing with in Sunset Review as questions that have already come up, but we're also working with committee staff, see if there are other opportunities. And I know there's a great interest by other members of the legislature to do something that might expedite the process for those prescribers that are obviously doing something based upon the investigation that you need to get out of practice quicker.
I would echo Ms. Shipsky's remarks and caution us all to realize that the legislature is not always the best writers of laws for the professions, and that we might want to make sure that we're being proactive about ensuring that what laws we'd like to see on the books for public protection are on the books, and it's not a trickle down, it's got to be organic trickle up.
Well, and quite honestly, that's been the focus with the board, on the board, has been the issue of, are we adequately protecting the consumer when we can identify a physician has overprescribed, prescribed wrongly, or that a death has resulted because of prescription medicines. And so I think we need to step up and figure out, by talking both of the physician community, but the pharmacy community, not pharmaceutical community, about how we can craft things that will better protect patients on this issue.
And Ian, if there's one area where I think we need to actually focus in with laser-like precision is on the issue of what our colleague from the DEA called the dealers. And overprescribing is a very broad category. There are people who are overprescribing because they've been taught that you need to give people enough for 6 months because they may be in pain for 6 months, versus those physicians, the small number, the 1% he described, who set up a business intentionally selling prescriptions for opioids. And reading cases, you can clearly distinguish the pill mill physicians. And if there's a role, I think, for legislation that may be more rapidly responsive, it's in the circumstance where someone is intentionally subverting the intent of the Medical Practice Act and selling prescriptions for pain meds. And I'm obviously not going to write language here, but as opposed to a physician who needs re-education on what the heck, how you treat pain and the appropriate role of narcotics. But
So let me ask you to that point that you just raised, the doctor that prescribes 6 months' worth of prescriptions to someone just in case they need it. Should there not be some kind of law in place that says, a rule, a standard of care rule that says that for this kind of medicine, we need to see the patient this amount of time with some regularity? And is that not the responsibility that this committee should be talking about as far as education and opportunities for rules and regs, that if you're going to be prescribing these things, that you have to come back and see,
and
the patient has to come back and see you, otherwise they're not going to get this. I don't mind the 6 months if you really have that kind of need, but I do mind the doctor that's not seeing the patient prescribing for 6 months, and then 5 months, 0.9, the patient is something's happened.
I believe we do have, the medical board has published, and physicians are very well aware
I hope so.
of the frequency with which they need to see patients, and there is growing understanding of the role of urine drug testing to rule out diversion and pain contracts.
I hope you're right, but I would just like to know that.
Described.
And some of these businesses that are set up do follow those procedures. They just don't happen to see the patients. In the same way that a treating physician would see a patient. They may see them as they're collecting their check prescription and paying their bill. But thank you. We'll put that on our list.
I'd just like to add 2 points. First of all, the controlled substances and whether they're classified in Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, in part, is based on the frequency with which and the closeness of the monitoring that the I guess society or the law requires for the practitioner to exert over a patient. So, for example, in the case of a narcotic that's in Schedule 2, you have to see the patient every single time that you write the prescription, or you can give 2 advanced prescriptions. You can write, you can hand the patient 2 additional ones. You can fill this not before March 1st. You can fill this one not before April 1st, but that can only go out 90 days. There's really tough requirements out there, but the problem is the quantity isn't restricted, and those that are going to violate the law are going to find ways around it. So that's an issue. And with response to your comment, I think it's very important that I close the loop here. April 27th is the next drug take-back day. So we're already starting to promote that. That's a big deal because we don't have another DEA drug take-back scheduled for the fall, in part because they released what they believe are going to be their ultimate regs for the disposal and take-back of controlled substances. It took them, 2.5 years, maybe 3 years to get there. We provided comments back. They're not done yet with where they're going. And there's a bill going through the legislature to encourage pharmacies to take these items back. And the
county of Alameda actually has legislation that is actually putting a surcharge so that
Right.
Take-back disposal can actually be paid for by the pharmaceutical industry.
And I believe that's one of the elements that they're looking at in this bill, too, because the funding for it is also an issue in how you're going to fund it. But a lot of pharmacies will do this voluntarily as a customer service sometimes, too, as long as the costs don't become prohibitive. But we have concerns about the drugs coming back into the pharmacy because, unfortunately, just like those guns, the patient can get paid to get those drugs back, too. And then they get redispensed. If you go into an illegal or a pharmacy that's looking for making money on drugs, they will literally go into the bins and take them back. They will recycle the drugs that they get into the program or from skilled nursing facilities. So that's part of our concern with the drugs coming back into a pharmacy. We don't want that temptation to be there.
And in LA County, the sheriff actually, what he did for a while, I don't know if they've pulled them off, but they took old mailboxes and they painted them white, and they used them as where you could drop the drugs off. You can't get necessarily into it. But when we tried to do this in Long Beach, our chief of police just absolutely refused. He said that, his officers have to be on site and actually physically take custody when they bring it. And by the way, we don't do gun buyback programs in Long Beach because often what will happen in crimes, just a little bit of trivia, is that that's where they bring the guns that have committed a crime. And so then you have difficulty tracing that gun to the criminal. So they do not buy back guns in Long Beach for that reason.
Good to know, but let me ask you a question. You just said something, April 27th is a drug take-back day. Where?
Everywhere. If you go onto our website, we'll have a link where you can go, you put in your zip code, and it'll give you locations near you. It's all run through the DEA. Right. So if you go to www.dea.gov, which is the federal entity, you should be able to find a link that way.
So let me suggest that's nice, but it's useless. Okay? That anybody that wants to do this, you have got to make it accessible and convenient. Accessible and convenient doesn't mean that Barbara has to remember to go to www.da.gov. So my recommendation is that we now have something we can put out there as a blast. We can put it out there as a blast by the medical board. We can put it out there by the pharmacy board. We can ask that every other board that oversees prescribing put it out there. And we can ask elected officials to put it in their newsletters. These newsletters go to their constituents. People read them. At least some people do read them. We can ask local media to put it in there. I mean, this is something we have something tangible. Let's use it. Let's not miss an opportunity, so to say.
We have 3 weeks. Yep. I think it's already up on ours. But you're right. I think that's a good opportunity, and especially getting the elected officials involved. It's a good
But I'm going to
thing.
suggest to you, up on your website's not good enough. An email blast to your constituents to say to their customers when they walk in the pharmacy, do you know that you can bring back your drugs to this pharmacy on April 27th? There's not a big deal.
No questions asked.
Yeah, but most places, they're not pharmacies that the DA allows them to come back to, quite honestly. They're bringing them back to hospitals. They're bringing them back with law
Oh, well,
enforcement.
that's not what I just heard. I heard all.
Yeah, they're
Didn't I
not.
just hear everybody's doing it?
Not all
No.
pharmacies.
There's locations where they agree to do it because you've got the DEA there. Not everybody's set up to do it.
Right.
A lot of them are pharmacies. A lot of them are
Okay,
community
so how about
events.
this? How about this? You guys have nothing to do for 3 weeks, I'm sure. So for 3 weeks, can you come up with by county where it's available? Can you blast it to the county, state office holders and local office holders and ask them to publicize? I mean, can we do something with this information? I don't understand. We've got 3 weeks. We have something that's really could make an impact and make a difference. Can we ask the Department of Consumer Affairs? Can we ask the governor's office? Can we take a look at making this, if this isn't important? I mean, I'm hearing that it is very important, take back stuff. If it's not very important, then forget it. But I'm just suggesting that we need to have something when we have an opportunity like this. I'd like to know where it is because guess what? I will bring all those 40 Vicodin bottles back somewhere with pleasure. That's not the point. That's the point. I have lots of teeth. They've come out.
And some communities actually do a very good job publicizing it. I know in the community in which I live, every pharmacy, because they're under the gun all the time, has signs that says, go there, go somewhere else on April 27th already. CVS has done this for a long time.
I haven't seen anything, so I'm just saying.
It's a community-specific
But
thing.
part of it's a repetitive message too. You want to try to get the first time you try to educate people, it's not going to
Nobody
usually
hears you,
hit.
right.
And you've got to just kind of repeatedly throw it out there.
Okay, thank you. Any last minute, thank you. I mean, good. Thank you very much. It was really most successful. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item number 5 and ask Ms. Simoes to come up and discuss
You okay?
interested parties work group, please.
Good morning. SB 380 Right was signed into law in 2011 and was sponsored by the California Academy of Preventive Medicine. This bill requires the Medical Board of California to convene a working group of interested parties to discuss nutrition and lifestyle behavior for the prevention and treatment of chronic disease at a quarterly board meeting within 3 years of the effective date of the bill. This bill also requires the board to periodically disseminate information and educational material regarding the prevention and treatment of chronic disease by the application of changes in nutrition and lifestyle behavior to each licensed physician and surgeon and to each general acute care hospital in California. Board staff has had discussions with the author's office of this and the sponsors of this bill on the mandate to hold a working group meeting, and we believe it would be best to hold this meeting in Sacramento. Board staff thinks it would be appropriate to hold the working group as part of the Education and Wellness Committee. Additionally, staff believes a working group meeting could be held via this committee in conjunction with the board meeting in Sacramento on July 18, 2013. This committee may wish to appoint some of the members of this committee to participate in the working group. Board staff will continue to work with the author's office, the sponsors, and other interested parties, as well as this committee, in the planning of and the agenda for the working group meeting as required by this bill. That concludes my presentation.
So you're looking for volunteers for this working group?
Because it's a working group, it would require participation from the sponsors. Have actually sent a letter to the California Academy of Preventive Medicine and has suggested 7 names to participate in this working group. And I will also be working with the author's office to see if they have any additional names. Because it's a working group, these people would actually have to, wouldn't be a public comment type setup. It would be a working group. And so, if the committee wishes, they may want to appoint a couple members to participate in this working group.
So let me ask you a question. I'm
committee could.
not looking to, before we ask for volunteers, I'm looking to suggest that there are people that are doing this already anyway, that maybe a call for best practices from entities that are already doing this anyway might be an idea, so that I would ask that at least that people from managed healthcare groups, American Diabetes Association, those people be invited to participate in this work group. I'm just concerned that
I think the California Academy of Preventive Medicine does have some best practices that they want to participate in this working group. But then the second part after the working group of what we come up as educational items could be distributed is a requirement that we disseminate that information to all physicians and general acute care hospitals. So after that work group, our plan would be to take that information that we got in the working group, and we would basically get it out to physicians via the newsletter or and then we would work with Department of Public Health to get it out to hospitals via their all facility letters.
Dr. Levine?
So I have a question about a process question. So you're suggesting that this occur in lieu of the Education and Wellness Committee?
Well, as part of, so, we could have some items as, that are just Education and Wellness Committee items, but then, start the working group portion of that.
But that would then involve all the members of this committee?
I would suggest the opposite. I would suggest that the work group should report back to this committee, maybe, versus this committee here, or facilitate a meeting of the work group. But I could be.
Okay, so, well, my response to that would be, because the way the bill is written, it says it has to be part of the board meeting. And so we've even gotten criticism for making it part of the education committee. We were thinking of doing it in the committee format might make more sense than actually doing it at a full board meeting. But the way the bill's worded, it has to be.
So we could do the working group as part of the board meeting, prior to the board meeting, like the day before.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Wednesday before.
Right, exactly.
So as part of the committee meeting, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
So Dr. Salmonson, did you want
So
to?
can I,
I guess you'd go with that. I just wondered if you could reiterate.
Your microphone, please.
If you could tell again the requirements of the bill,
Okay,
just so
sure.
we could better maybe.
Okay. So the bill actually requires the board to convene a working group of interested parties to discuss nutrition and lifestyle behavior for the prevention and treatment of chronic disease at a quarterly board meeting within 3 years of the effective date of the bill. Although we still have some time, we're getting a lot of pressure from the author's office and the sponsors as to when we're going to hold this work group meeting. So,
Dr. Levine?
second part of my question
I
was,
apologize.
no, that's okay. The interested parties are more than the California Academy of Preventive Medicine. So I'm assuming
I
there'll
was
be
suggesting
outreach.
what I was suggesting.
California Academy of Family Medicine, of Family Practice needs to be included. The Prevention Institute should be invited. There are tremendous, unlike, quite honestly, there's an awful lot of work going on.
See, that's why I had suggested like the American Diabetes Association. I had suggested the managed healthcare. And we've had, if we're getting dinged on this, we did have a meeting where a young man came and did a very wonderful, in my opinion, presentation in front of the full board, of which I have sent his name and CV on to other entities because that's how impressed I was. And I'm sure other people that watched it or were present at the meeting heard his presentation as well, that there is work going on. So unless Mr. Wright is looking to hold this meeting in his office, which I don't think he is, I think that to broaden the opportunity And to do it right is a bit more professional than to just do it because we've been told to do it.
No, I definitely plan from now until then to contact the author's office, but also other interested parties. So, I've wrote the names down that Sharon's given me, or Dr. Levine's given me. But if there's any other names, please feel free to email them to me, and I'll do outreach.
The professional boards that deal with this, the board, the pediatric boards. I mean,
American Academy.
American, yeah. I mean, there's, as well as the schools. It might be interesting to hear what if the schools are working in conjunction with nursing programs. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Public schools, Ask Mr.
definitely plan-
Charlotte's office to show up too.
The purpose of this update was just kind of let you know this is coming, and to make sure everyone was okay with the strategy. And then we have some time between now and July to contact all the other interested parties.
I mean, clinic associations maybe too. And we can have everybody show up
We will do our best to include all the interested parties.
and then make sure they stay. Okay, so you're not really going to take volunteers now, right? You don't
Yeah,
really need it.
if we do it as part of the whole thing, then
Sure.
we don't really need.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to item number 6 and ask Ms. Hawkinson and Ms. Simoes to please come forward. And Ms. Simoes, would you please introduce Ms. Hawkinson as well to the committee?
The board recently hired a new public information officer too, and her name is Cassandra Hawkinson. She's only been here for a couple weeks, and we were very glad to have her.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to meet all of you. I'm happy to be here. I want to start with our public affairs strategic plan, and I want to bring something forth that I think is absolutely key to all of it, and that is that we need to engage social media, but we need to be smart about it. And I feel that what we should do is start Twitter. Twitter is very manageable, and I will, of course, be developing a presentation to the committee on how it'll work and its time commitment. But I can tell you that it's the way of the future, and you can get information out, and you don't have to worry about things being posted and people commenting like you do on Facebook. I don't think Facebook is appropriate for the medical board, but Twitter, absolutely. It can easily be used and controlled. You can obtain what's called an official status, which means that Twitter will label our tweets as definitely from the Medical Board of California, so that when people receive them, they know they're from us. You can direct followers to our website. You can disseminate information with regards to our newsletter, regulations. I mean, there's so much immediacy at this. These, limited characters can get a lot of information out really quickly, and you can build following. And I think that it provides, like I said, immediate contact and outreach. You can alert to information. It's just, it's a plethora of things that it can accomplish for us.
So let me ask you a question. Within that development of a plan, could you also survey your supposed audience as to how effective they feel this would be, as well as how much would they use, or do they use it currently?
Well, it's right now I can tell you absolutely that it is the media's Bible.
I'm not asking about the media's Bible because they're not my constituency. I'm asking about our physicians, our licensees, as well as our consumers.
Yes, forgive me, but let me explain further. This is the way a lot of agencies reach their stakeholders and their constituencies and consumers. In order to start with Twitter, you would need to start building up your situation, building up your followers. And we can interlink that with, certainly we could do a survey to see if that would be something that people would like through SurveyMonkey. But in addition, keep in mind that, if you talk about this coming up and you mention this on the website, that, you now have a Twitter account and you have the little icon there, people will see that and they'll start following, because people realize that it is immediate and they realize that that's information that's coming across at current time. Yes?
Will you be targeting the general public, or would you be targeting physicians, and would you have two sort of messages that one would go to one group of followers, and I guess they could cross, but...
They would cross. I mean, I don't see any reason why what you would Twitter wouldn't apply to both. I mean, if you're twittering a new law and regulation, the consumer's going to be interested in that as well as a physician. I mean, I see no distinction there, quite honestly. You know, you're sharing information, you're educating not only the physicians and the students, but you're also educating the consumer as to what's going on and what we're doing. And the fact that we have a new article up on pain management on our website. Here's our link. Go to our website. I mean, we can direct people to our newsletters, to our websites. I mean, we can utilize this in, like I said, a plethora of manner. So many different ways we can use it. And it's not difficult to maintain. It doesn't require hours of time. You know, what you want to do is maybe you could easily Twitter a couple of messages a day. You could have a couple people that have access to the Twitter account that can do the tweets. They can be approved. You know, they can go through exec staff for approval before they go out. I mean, I really, really strongly feel that it's a key to what we want to do and what we want to accomplish.
Could we first maybe focus on fixing our website before we start directing people to it?
I agree, and I'm going to get to that as well.
Because I brought this up before. I teach healthcare administration. I have my students look at the website each semester, and
Yes.
they don't find it consumer friendly.
No, I don't either.
And it's not friendly for a diverse population.
Agree.
It looks like it was set up by staff and without the stakeholders that use it. So I would hope before we start directing people over to a website that we could make it a little bit more informative and easier to follow.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I'm going to address that. That's part of my plan. So I'm going in order. So kind of bear with me just a moment. Right now we're talking about the unprofessional education outreach, which is where I'm starting with this. And like I said, as we go through these 9 different items, social media is going to be on every one of them. So it's just the outlay of this. And so I wanted to bring this up front right away to let you know that I feel that is a big key. Let's move to education outreach with regards to educating our students and graduates. I feel like the teams of 2, reestablish that speaking bureau, 1 staff person and a board member to talk to professional meetings. I think it's a great idea. I think you can take that concept a step further regarding professional education by filming those and putting them on the web. You can also do webinars for this. I know that travel sometimes is an issue. Webinars can reach a large number of people, and there's different people that set webinars up. It's easy. I know we do webinars with our board meetings. That's a way to reach a large audience in addition. I think personal appearances by our educators can be videotaped, like I said, for YouTube distribution as well. These educational meetings that we have, whether we're addressing the problem with prescription drug use or whatever it is, we can film that. We can put that on our website, and we can put that on YouTube both. It can go both places. We can even do a video on specific education topics, like I mentioned. We can inform on licenses of various regulations, requirements, latest trends, anything that we would like to focus on. We can set that up, we can film it, and we can put it out there. But I also think the actual physical appearance and public speaking is important as well. But this does open us up to reaching a much larger audience. Website. I propose we need some help with the website, most definitely. I agree with you completely. We had a survey done on SurveyMonkey as well and got some feedback already. But some of the things that I'm proposing for that, for education, and again, like I said, a lot of these are going to cross over for a lot of these other topics, is I proposed a segment that we do called a Story of the Week about an issue of interest to licensees along with a photo on the main page. And what we would do is we call a splash page. You call them a blast splash page, where you have something on the web page and you talk about it And then as you click the link, you go into more detail on it and links, further links with further information, further education. I find those work very well. They're well received. I utilized them at the Air Resources Board and found that they were very successful. It's a very easy concept, and it kind of brightens up your web page. You can do a different story. You can do a couple of them a week. You know, you can change that and get that moving and not be stagnant. I also feel like we can create a need to know or a be alert section on the main page that articulates current problem areas and enforcement or compliance, along with solutions for physicians and medical students. Kind of here's a current problem you need to be aware of. You know, we could even put a link for additional solution. You can go to this link, or we can, again, you know, give a solution, have them go into a deeper storyline into our web page. But I think that having that be alert section and having it labeled and set apart, I think is a really good idea to draw attention. 80% of the people that go to our website read our main page, and they read our main page. So I think that, you know, these are quick, easy things we can get up there on our main page to make it more viable and more interesting. Also, as I talked about earlier about the videos, you know, I'm going ahead and putting videos on our page and providing links to those videos. Certainly, you can have a library of the videos. You can, you know, archive them as they get older and keep them in a separate spot. But I think that videos on your page are important. You know, I think that you can certainly do that as well. We're going to move on to outreach and education with regards to the public. Again, the social media that I spoke about. But like I said, I will provide a more detailed presentation on this with regards to the work and the time commitment and that type of thing. Again, YouTube we talked about. Website. The website needs to be more intuitive. I completely agree. Web visitors are important, and basically, you know, web visitors have, again, answers that same question. You know, this is why we matter. And this is what people are looking at. They want to know, you know, what are you going to do for me? Right off the bat. Right off the bat. And they don't want to have to search for what you're going to do for them. They want to see it right away. Educational outreach, again, we talked about the public speaking engagements. I recommend public speaking engagements at senior centers and facilities. This can be extended to a variety of organizations. We can speak to Lions Club, Kiwanis Club. We can speak at senior centers. We can have a wide variety of areas that we can speak from a consumer standpoint. In other words, you know, we can do outreach this way. And I did a lot of this when I worked at KCRA. I was the director of the Call 3 program, which is their consumer advocacy program, and I spoke to a lot of these centers, and people have luncheons, and Teachers Association. I mean, I can go on and on. I've even spoke to the Assembly and the Senate about consumer advocacy. There's a lot of places that we can go with that educational outreach from a consumer level. When travel's restricted, again, we spoke about filming videos or webinars. I know we have travel restrictions, but here in our area, we're the capital, and a lot of people pay attention on what's going on here. And so consequently, you know, when we're doing events and doing things here, people do pay attention. I also think that we should conduct outreach at area events and fairs and cultural events. We can put out booths. I know this is something we did in the past. I think we need to bring it back. As a matter of fact, I've started that. We have been invited and are going to participate in the Franchise Tax Board's Wellness Fair on May 29th. And we will have a booth there. And that will be our first jump back into outreach. It's another state agency. It's nearby. It gets a lot of attention.
Also, the fact that there was, once the articles ran, there was no response from the board as a letter to the editor, and we've got to stop that, because the assumption, I have to tell you, in the community is we agreed with it. We didn't respond to it, and that must mean we agreed to it. And so two things came across in those articles. One was that I think they indicated they had attempted to get a contact and their calls wasn't returned, and I don't remember the context on that. That's always a bad thing. But secondly, when those articles ran, they were let as is.
Right.
So I would hope, and I was going to bring this to the full board, I'm hoping that we can develop some kind of policy on this board about a rapid response, and that these articles do not be allowed just to sit, that there is some official response from the chair that indicates that where the inaccuracies are in the article, so the public has something to hear back from us.
Sure. May I draw your attention to 3.4? I agree with you. Of course, this is my third week with the board, so
Why haven't you fixed everything?
I'm working on it. I think we need to reach out to local media, but as we look here, technically, we need to define ourselves and our message. I completely agree with you. And we need to handle negative media, and it has three components. We need to stick with our message, we need to focus on the positive when possible, and we need to make them accountable. Track their stories and compliment them on good ones, and call them to task when they're misrepresented. And that indeed is exactly
But that
right.
doesn't mean
And
the
I,
PIO doing it. That means that there be an official response from this board when the board is attacked publicly.
I agree. You should have a letter to the editor.
Yes.
You should hold them accountable.
Yes,
If a
and
television station
quickly.
does, yes,
Quickly.
I'm agreeing. And so when I'm saying make them accountable, track their stories and compliment them on good ones, and call them to task when misrepresented, that's exactly what I mean, and I feel that very strongly.
Have we seen any good stories lately?
Um,
I haven't seen any good
it's my
stories.
third
Stock market's up.
week.
Stock market's up. Stock market.
Are you,
no,
are you
I
talking
mean
about for us?
Us, not good news generally, Barbara.
The answer is no.
Well, and that's why I want to turn this around, and that's why I'm saying that, to reach out to the media and answer their questions and provide them what they need, and to stick to our messaging, establish our message, stick to the messaging, focus on the positive when possible, and make them accountable, build a relationship with them, then we can have that relationship and we can pitch positive stories to them on the off time. When they're not like looking for problems, we can say, hey, we've got some really good stuff we're doing, and we'd like to pitch
understand
that.
but I don't want to see another article in the LA Times about the board that goes unresponded to.
I agree. But like I said, it's my third week, so I'm working on it.
No, I know. And I know I'm appointed by the Senate Rules Committee, and I have to tell you, the Senator Steinberg very concerned about what's been appearing in the LA Times.
I understand. And I really and actually, when I interviewed, my second interview, I talked about the fact that, in fact, I actually did my first interview. We talked about writing a letter to the editor, and that's something that should always happen when you feel that there's a misrepresentation. They need to be held accountable. You need to point it out to them. You just don't let them.
Right, like little minor things, not referring to Dr. Levine as a physician in the article mentioning it at all.
Right.
I mean, that was a gross inaccuracy.
Actually, usually when we hear from the press right now, or when I'm hearing from the press right now, it's over a problem, like a doctor. There was a doctor arrested for DUI in Chico, and I talked to the Chico paper about that. He did a really nice article, and it was in the notes, and he did a nice job with the article, and I thought he represented what I said and what we do very well. And that would be an example of something that I thought, under the circumstances, was a pretty positive situation for us, the way we addressed it. I don't have a copy of it with me, but I know it was sent out in our notes, our news notes, the articles. It was in the articles, and it just came out, I think she put it in yesterday's or the day before.
They go out on Fridays.
Oh, we get them every day. You'll get them. Okay.
So let me suggest that in addition to, you've mentioned a couple of times there's issues with travel. I just would like to remind you, I'm sure you've been told this, but the board meets in other areas other than Sacramento.
Yes.
We're going to be meeting in April in Los Angeles.
Right.
We have a huge media community in Los Angeles.
Which is the genesis of the articles in the LA Times. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some proactive kind of work with the media
That means
before
meeting
we go
people.
out there.
Yeah, but it means also meeting with there's local media, there's ethnic media, and there's also the LA Times. But I'm just suggesting that use these opportunities when you're in other areas in the state. The computer works in between. I just don't want to
Sure.
see that we're going to take an opportunity to bypass Los Angeles again, and we're going to be there again, and there needs to be the opportunity to meet with people and to
Well, I'm sorry, but I won't be there at the end of April because I actually have a family issue, so I won't be at that board meeting. However, I also have some suggestions and some advice with regards to that. Yes.
Well, I just think a topic that I'd like to get input on how we can get this out, and that's how, now that the board has jurisdiction over accredited surgery centers, and get that information out there, because I think that the public is very confused. What's accredited? What is licensed?
How is it different?
And what's the difference? And, you know, we have been trying to get the message out, check on your physician, but now they have the opportunity to check on their surgery center. And there have been some improvements by having a direct button that I'd been asking for, not having to go through the alphabet system to find it, but it's still a little tricky. And I think so much goes on in surgery centers that we don't know about. And I think, again, I mean, I've got other concerns about the accrediting agencies, but that's a different talk. But at the very least, to say, hey, here's something, an opportunity for public protection, but please, public, take advantage of it.
Sure.
And I would think, I don't know if they're mandated. I think Barbara has said she has seen it in some surgery centers. If they are, just like physicians have to put up their, you know, we're regulated.
Right.
Does the surgery center? Because if they don't have to, I think they should, because that would be helpful. So if a patient sees something that doesn't seem right, they can report it to us, and not just to try to track down one of 4 accrediting agencies, which
I
would be
agree.
a good challenge.
I agree. Please, may I go back to your comments with regards to Southern California media? There's a couple things that that we need to do. One thing we're doing right away, and that is we need to develop what's called a listserv. It's a media listserv, and what it is it's a list of all news publications, all of them, that you can send newsletter to, news release to, and what I'm going to talk about in a moment, which is called a news advisory. We don't have this, and we're setting it up. Actually,
Wait, we don't have it?
for media, for current media contacts. In other words,
Well, you have the contacts, you might not have the person.
well,
You don't have it?
it's a listserv is set up so that you can send it out on an email blast
Right.
to media only.
We don't have that?
We have a listing on paper.
No, but you don't have a
we don't have
listserv?
a listserv, no.
I'm in the process of creating that, actually. I have my listserv from the Air Resources Board, so we're going to be adding to that. We're working on that as we speak.
So let me suggest, I'm glad you have it from Air Resources, but let me suggest to you that the Department of Consumer Affairs must have something like this for for the media. You would think that a state entity would have, and I would recommend that you might want to, this might be an opportunity to open the door and build a relationship with them anyway, or the governor's office. The governor's office has a media, a whole staff of people.
Well, actually, I am meeting with Russ Heinrich
Good,
next week.
good.
But yeah, I mean,
Please.
hang on a second. The listserv needs to be done, and I want to look a listserv. I mean, stations and media are stations and media. Okay, CBS 2 is CBS 2, no matter who has it on their listserv. I'm going to go through. And get all of these on. Plus, as we build reputations and relationships with different reporters, we can add them to our listserv. In addition, I feel strongly that we should add national publications like the New York Times and places like that, because they are also.
I'm sorry, can we back up? We've got
Sure.
a big problem coming in April. We just, again, were blasted in the LA Times. We are going to LA. We know Mike Helsick will be there. We know some of the people who blasted on the Sunset thing will be there. We need to do something proactively.
See, and
because
that's,
they will
by
be-
the way, Michael Hilsick is the guy that wrote the articles
Right.
on the lap band. He happens
Okay.
to write in the business section, not a health writer. And it would be very good to invite him since we're going to be doing that subject anyway, as a proactive, come and see what we're doing.
Okay.
And that's a very good idea.
I would
Jerry.
need a direct contact for him, and I can add him on. But in addressing your concern, and I know I'm not going to be there in April, but I have a solution and I have a suggestion for all of our future information. And that is that we start doing what are called news advisories.
I know. Well, wait a minute. But is
But-
there other staff that can be there? Because this is not
Yes.
just.
Yes, there will be other staff. But I mean, I want to explain to you, you want to reach out to media, you want to get them to come to things, okay? Your news, your news releases are informational. A news advisory is not. A news advisory is to attract media to an event. This is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, this is why we're doing, this is what you're going to find out.
What, when, where, and why.
Exactly.
We're
So-
kind of familiar with what you're talking
we
about.
do this all the time.
But they're not sent out by this agency, and they should be. And so in sending out news advisories to the media, when we have board meetings, when we have events and stuff that we would like to draw them to and attract them to, they're easy, they're short, they're sweet, and we get them out on the listserv. And not only that, but if there's a specific situation where we want media to come after we send out a news advisory, like let's say we're having some sort of an outreach event, we can also contact their assignment desks.
Right.
Personally
we know the
and get them
logistics.
out.
The problem is we know they're going to come.
Right.
So it would be very helpful if either you or the executive director can prepare some talking points, because the board members, I can guarantee you, are going to be asked, because this issue is still very hot, particularly about overprescribing, and drug seeking and the whole
Right.
issue about cures. So they're going to expect that somehow we've had some updates about what's going on, because they will be there and will probably want to know that information.
No problem with talking points. I mean, I agree. You should have them, and we should be able to address it. But in the news advisory, when you send that out as well, you also have who they could contact for further questions and information. And I plan on watching the meeting here on the web and having my name and number for additional contact information if people have specific questions, so that I'll be up to speed on what's happening and how we can respond and what our messaging is going to be. So I'm not going to be available. I'm not going to be able to travel because of a family issue on that particular meeting, and I apologize. It's not the norm for me. But I do plan on doing a news advisory. I'm in the process of, like I said, building up that listserv to get that out, to get the news advisory out, so we can notify people before the board meeting so that they know this is the board meeting's coming up, this is where it's going to be. If you have additional questions about anything, that you can contact me, and I'll probably have Jennifer on it as well as a backup. But yes, we will have that, and yes, I will be available for questions and contact. And yes, I think you should also have talking points. I need to know what the concerns are, obviously, because I'm new with regards to your talking points. I'm learning that today at this meeting, a lot of it.
You might want to get the media clippings of the past year.
Yes.
Board articles on the board, and those are the things we're concerned about, because those are the things we're going to be asked about.
Okay. And that's something I can certainly do, and we can prepare talking points for it. Now, in your public now, my understanding, though, is that we're going to be addressing pretty much what's on the agenda that people can actually comment on and ask about, but not public comment items. That gives them an opportunity to hear what the problems are and then address them later. Am I not correct on that?
Right. That's
There's no cross-discussion, public comment.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so
So you have your work cut out in front of you, but you need to hear from this committee, and you will hear from the board, its frustration
yeah, absolutely.
of the lack of engagement, of outreach and communications to underserved communities, as well as to the general population in communities. So know that you've got your work cut out for you, so we're going to look forward to hearing positive messaging that you've gotten all this together, because it's a big deal. I mean, I'm surprised to know that this is not in place, and there are resources. You don't have to be sitting there figuring it out all by yourself. I'm suggesting that
Yeah, I
there are.
understand.
Okay, I'm glad, but I'm concerned.
Okay.
Well, it
Dr.
may be
Salmonson.
water under the bridge, but a tangible example was during time of furlough, and people didn't understand that we're not funded by tax dollars. And the interpretation in a particular article was the doctors are too cheap to spend enough for their license to have proper enforcement, when in fact we had a surplus, the money was taken from our fund, and we were mandated to have furloughs anyway. That explanation was subsequently provided by the CMA because the board apparently didn't feel it was appropriate to respond. And fortunately, CMA did, but that was a very wrong piece of information, very not even opinion, it was factually false. And we kind of let CMA take the ball, and believe me, I'm not defending them, but in that instance, they did accurately answer that. But that's just an example of how we do feel we're kind of under the need to not respond as individual board members, but we're hoping for a board response on that kind of factual error.
So let me ask you a question on this strategic plan. I'm noticing that the dates are more or less all the same. I think that's going to be a problem, and unless you expect to be able to get everything accomplished that you want to get accomplished, that's great. But I just want you to realize that we're aware that the dates are all the same.
Well, okay. I mean, actually,
They're either summer and fall, or they're spring
Winter.
and summer.
yeah.
Okay,
And the
so-
spring, because some of these,
So we're talking
already
about from
started
now till
working on.
December. So my
Right.
concern is that sooner than later, certain things are going to have to be accomplished. The issue of priority for P, what does P stand for?
P is priority, and if you look at status in some of these, the reason like with spring, summer, let's talk about media activity. I've already started to reach out to the CMA, the Attorney General's Office, the Franchise Tax Board, and of course, Department of Consumer Affairs. We do want to partner with them, not only in different, in press releases and information sharing and that type of thing. That's something that's I'm already working on, is already happening.
Okay, so in addition to CMA, realize that there's a lot of professional organizations that represent
Absolutely.
doctors as well as, CMA is not the only, I mean, they spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money and a lot of energy.
Sure.
And they're very vocal, and they're very engaged.
Yes.
That's not to short circuit them at all, but to consider that there are other opportunities for broader engagement.
Oh, absolutely, but we need to start somewhere, and those are good places to start. We've had an issue with a doctor locally in Rockland that Franchise Tax Board has also got an issue with, so partnering with them. Attorney General's Office, I'm meeting with their PIO next week, and CMA I already made contact with, and I hope to meet up with them. I'm sure there's other agencies, but to me, status is status, and that's a priority to me, is to start making these relationships. That's why it says spring and summer, because it's spring and I've already started. And with regards to clearly defining ourselves and our message, that's something we have to do right away. So that's why that has the same date. Exercising reasonable transparency, that's something we have to do right away. That's why that's got that date as well. So please keep in mind when you're looking at this and you're looking at my status, that it's indicating to you that things have started.
Well, no, I can appreciate that. I just want you to know that we're all concerned. We're waiting
I
for you.
understand.
You're here. We're happy you're here. We're looking forward to your success. Let me suggest to you that what I'm hearing from you is that you're going to be very proactive, which I can very much
Yes,
appreciate. For me,
correct.
that's very important. So I'd venture to say that it's also an issue in the ethnic communities to be proactive and not to wait to hear back from them to
Absolutely.
determine your contacts.
Absolutely. I actually have a very good friend who's the head of communications and public relations for CalAsia, so the CalAsian Chamber of Commerce. So I will be contacting Gordon, and I plan on reaching out, like I said, to him. And I spent a lot of my time putting this together thoughtfully and trying to, be as practical as possible and address all the problems that I see with the medical board. And quite honestly, from my perspective is what I used to do. You're right. Your reputation, you guys need help. And I'm here to help you. I'm here to make it
part of
better.
But, in fairness, this board went through a lot of hours putting a strategic plan together.
Right.
With the elements and prioritizing things that we felt were important, particularly on the educational outreach, the outreach, the information. So we're acutely aware of the need
Sure.
to improve the image. And actually, if we go back 3.4, one of the things, if you're looking to add things on this, when you get to the handling negative media, if you could add the fourth point, and that would be that the response needs to be done rapidly and timely.
Absolutely. No question about that. Absolutely. News is now. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. It's now. It's in the now, and you have to respond in the now. I completely agree with you. Yeah, that goes without saying. Like I said, I'm learning, a little bit more of some of the issues that you guys have dealt with, certainly coming on board. And, you know, I realize that there's other things that I still need to learn, that I'm still discovering and learning about with regards to how things were handled in the past and processes and that type of thing. But we need to be more transparent. We need to determine our message. We need to outreach. We need to get out there. We need to respond. We need to not hide our heads in the sand, and we need to make them be accountable. Don't let them, you know, misrepresent us or say things that are inappropriate, whether it's the LA Times or the Chico Times or whatever it is. If they have false information, it should be brought to their attention. You should always bring it to their attention, no matter
So
who
let
it
me
is.
also recommend, because what I'm hearing is a possible shift in what has been the policy in the past. And if it is a shift in the policy, then it's a shift. I'm not suggesting there should be or there is, but what I'm hearing is that the opportunity for members of this board to be speaking on behalf of the board in a public situation, so that if that is going to be the shift, which
Well, I
I'm
think
not.
we put that in the strategic
Okay,
report.
but if that's going to be if that's going to be the shift, then what has to also happen is that the messaging has to be united. You have got to do, and our executive director has got to do some training so that we are on message, so that we don't have a whole. Okay, I know what you said there. I just want you to hear what I'm saying.
I
There's a
understand.
reason.
I'm not sure where you got that I was going to have you guys talking to the media. I mean, you certainly, in certain circumstances, you know.
Okay, fine.
we
I
may,
thought
but-
I was hearing
but
that, so
no,
that's what I'm-
I will talk with the media, and I will, you know, represent the board with regards to the media and our messaging, but we all still need to have
We
our
need to be on the
messaging
same page. We all need to be
correct.
on the same page. That's
Yes,
all I'm
regardless
suggesting.
of whether you're being interviewed or not.
Right.
You
I
know,
just wanna
if
make
you
sure-
get cornered in the grocery store by, you know, a local reporter for some reason, and you feel, you know, you need to understand or realize, you know, what our messaging is and what the deal is.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that there's going to be a two-way street here. That's what I just
Oh,
wanna-
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
What might be helpful too is if you contact the Federation of Medical Boards and to talk with them about what they see medical boards are doing in terms of this kind of social media, because there's been some actually some concern put out there about using social media as it relates to physicians and others related to
I'm aware of
physicians.
it, and I've already looked at their information, and actually their concerns deal with more with you know,
Generations.
prescribing and things like that, and treating and that type of thing with
Well,
social
yes,
media,
you wouldn't
and
tweet a
negative
prescription.
comments
Right.
with regards to, you know, having a Facebook and having these things, which is not
Well,
Twitter.
you can retweet and you can put negative comments
You
on an
can, but it
initial
isn't
tweet.
somewhere where you
can be
can
removed
go
as
and
well.
look. It's people who are following you that may see them, and usually people follow you for a reason.
Okay,
And
again, I feel kind of resistance. We're trying to give you some feedback
I
because
understand.
we've worked extensively on the strategic plan. What I would hope that you would contact the
Yes.
Federation of Medical Boards.
Absolutely.
And then get back to us a sense of what are the other medical boards doing, because they are all facing kind of similar situations, both how to improve their outreach, their web, their social media.
I agree.
And things of that
But,
sort.
you know, again, I completely understand and I agree, but, you know, allow me to point out again that in the very beginning of this, I indicated that I'm going to need to develop a presentation for you on how this will work, the time commitment to use and maintain this. So that hasn't happened yet. But we're talking about it because I'm telling you it's important, but I'm not saying it's a done deal at this point in time. I still need to prepare this for you. I haven't done that yet, but I will.
We understand, but I'm just making a suggestion that they would be an excellent source.
I
of
agree.
See the best practices for medical boards. Since we seem to be awry on what we've been doing, maybe we can find other boards that have done it better, and we might find a great model of how they've put it in place.
I agree with you completely. And that would be part and parcel of my preparation with regards to,
If I can put you in contact, it happens, I sit on the education committee for the FSMB. I'm happy to put you in touch with the person that would be responsible.
that would be wonderful if you could send me an email. That'd be great.
Dr. Levine?
Just a tactical question.
Sure.
No one expects that you're on call 24/7. Is there a plan for media contacts that occur outside of business hours? Is there a beeper that gets carried?
Yeah, I actually have a cell phone and with a number as well. And it's on my emails for contact as well. And it will be on my business cards. Absolutely.
So what expectation are you creating amongst the world of media in terms of your availability? I mean, is that realistic?
You know, normally they don't contact you really off hours that often. I mean, usually they don't. I mean, but if it does happen and they're looking to get a hold of me, they'll be able to definitely be able to get a hold of me.
You're saying it's not frequent enough to be an issue for you?
It's not frequent enough, no. I mean, it is if you're dealing with like something like, you know, CDCR where you've got riots in prisons at any point in time and that kind of thing. But in our situation, it's not going to be that frequent. However, if there is an emergency, then I will be reachable and I will be there to do my job.
And to the media, an emergency
Sure.
is their deadline.
Exactly, and most of them, like I said, you know, they're on by 4 a.m. and off by 11:30. So, you know, anything in between there, they usually you don't hear from them. That's usually their time. That's not to say you wouldn't get a call at 6 in the morning, but no, that's fine. But oh, I'm sure they do. I mean, yes, they do. If there's an emergency, they will. And
No emergency, I just have a question. They should only call you for an emergency, it's good.
and that's pretty much, yeah. I mean, I was on that side of the table for over 10 years, so I understand.
Thank you.
Okay, anything more on this?
Not unless you have any
Item?
other questions. We kind of jumped around, but I think we covered everything.
Mr. Hepler, I see an opportunity for you to say something.
Well, I just want to say I think I've set a new world's record in elapsed time for not commenting until now. But I just want to comment that since this mostly deals with public outreach and going out to the public, I just want to make sure that we don't have any public comment on the room about this subject.
I would be happy to call for public comment, but I've not seen any public comment cards, and if the public is interested in speaking, I'm interested in listening. But I don't have a public comment card, so there's nobody going to be commenting. But thank you for your reminder.
After looking at this, is there any other questions that
Any
the
other
board has
questions?
for me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been an engaging discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we have on the agenda any future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items that they would like to bring forward at this point? So we'll get back to staff. Might I recommend to the board, to the committee, that if there are issues that, you know, in a timely fashion, if you could get them, who's staffing this committee? Is this Cassandra, are you doing this, or Jennifer? Both of you together? United? United, okay, so please contact either one of them or both of them at the same time, and future agenda items would be fine. Thank you. So again, in no public comments, I don't see any public comments, and I'm going to ask for a motion to, excuse me? If there's any agenda items to become forthcoming that,
SB 380 at the next meeting.
SB 380, okay? Which is SB 380? Mr. Wrights?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have a little conversation about that with him. Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Well, before
Yes?
there were some follow-up items from the last committee meeting, the last Education and Wellness Committee meeting, which probably ought to be agendized for the next one. We were going to re-review the mission statements and as I read through the agenda for the meeting today, I realized that there were some items that were scheduled to come back, and
You're correct, and we did that because now we're starting with a new PIO. We thought it'd be most important to go over her plan for implementing those, and then we could come back with that at the next meeting. So.
Okay, so motion to adjourn, please? So we're adjourned.
second.
I think you need a second, but thank you for that.